Joining us now is Dr. Maya Rockeymoore. She is founder, president, and CEO of Global Policy Solutions. That is a Washington-based consulting firm with a social change mission. And we are here to talk about expanding Social Security. Maya, thanks for coming on the program.
Richard, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And you guys just put out a talking paper, a white paper on expanding Social Security. Title is A Strategy to Strengthen Retirement Security for Vulnerable Populations and Future Generations. What was the motivation for doing this white paper?
Well, we are very concerned that we make sure that we counter people who are arguing that Social Security no longer has relevance in 21st century America. There are those who are saying that we can't afford the program as it is. And we're here to say not only can we afford the program, but if we actually make the right decisions about the program, we can actually expand and strengthen it, so that it actually has more adequate benefits for those populations that are very vulnerable.
Now, who are those populations?
Well, they include women, for example. Women are longer lived, and they tend to if they're relying on their own income in terms of what they made over a working life, they tend to be lower income. And even if they're married, certain populations of women married men who were of modest income as well. And so, when they outlive their spouses, then the issue becomes one of how do you survive. Another vulnerable population that we focus on is people of color. You have a situation where African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans are very, very vulnerable financially. And they tend not to have any assets outside, not many have many assets outside of their Social Security wealth. And so that means that Social Security needs to be adequate to meet their needs, whether that's in retirement or within the disability program or even in the survivor program. And speaking of survivors, we consider children a vulnerable population as well that Social Security covers. And so, we look at the full spectrum in many cases, but this particular brief focuses on the retirement side of the program.
This is the kind of thing that strikes me should be a no-brainer. I mean, you guys, your white paper quotes this extensively. Public opinion on Social Security expansion: 77% agree it's critical to preserve Social Security for future generations. 73% think it's a mistake to cut benefits. For current retirees, 69% oppose reducing benefit for future retirees. Yet only now are we seeing a shift in the public dialogue, or rather in the political dialogue, from benefit cuts to the possibility being debated, at least on the Democratic side of the aisle, of expanding benefits.
Absolutely, and I think it's because of the hard work of a lot of organizations and outlets such as yours that have been focused on educating the public about the need to strengthen and expand benefits. And it certainly doesn't help that you have prominent folks like Senator Warren and Senator Sanders and Congressman Cummings and others who are out there also touting the bandwagon as well in terms of the need for expanding benefits. So the fact of the matter is that we're educating the public, and the public is responding. As those poll numbers show, not only do Americans overwhelmingly favor strengthening and supporting Social Security, but it's across it's bipartisan. That's a bipartisan sentiment. Those Republicans, a majority of Republicans and a majority of Democrats feel the same way about it.
That's a really important point, because we live in a city, my Rockeymoore, where there's a sort of almost, I would call it a fetishizing of anything bipartisan. We want bipartisan this, we want bipartisan that. But if you get out of Washington, D.C. and talk to the voters at large, this is the bipartisan position.
It's Social Security is fundamentally bipartisan, and what happens between the time you step inside the Beltway is that ideology comes to play, partisan ideology. And policymakers who feel like they have to ignore what their constituents think to actually tout an ideological line that's consistent with their orthodoxy are basically tone deaf to the needs of the American people. And so I think that it's incredibly important that consistently polls, not just one, not just two, but across the board of years of polling shows that we have this kind of bipartisan support, which suggests that there's something wrong with policymakers once they get inside of the Beltway that clouds their reasoning and disconnects them from the needs of their constituents.
And one of those things, of course, might be the process itself of raising funds and campaigning. May put you, I'm just speculating here, might put you in a set of social circles that is not inclined to want to protect and expand Social Security.
I think that is absolutely the case. I think that the moneyed interests, particularly on the conservative side of the aisle, have been arguing for cutting back on Social Security and social insurance generally. What's ironic is, several years ago, the Business Roundtable, for heaven's sake, came out and said that we needed to cut back on Social Security and Medicare. Now, mind you, some of these companies don't even offer retirement benefits to some of their employees. And so it leads you to question, exactly how out of touch these elite actors are. And it shows, I think it underscores that they have a lot of influence in the political process, and especially, I think, on the conservative side of the table.
We're talking to Dr. Maya Rockeymoore, head of the Center for Global Policy Solutions, and at globalpolicysolutions.org you can read their paper on expanding Social Security. You talked about the populations affected by this. We talked about people of color, and you also refer to future generations. Right.
And I failed to mention low-income populations, but definitely. But, we've had a dialogue over the last some decade where people who have been opposed to Social Security have tried to argue that it's actually hurting younger people and generations. And that argument is simply false. It's a fallacy. And here's why. First of all, people need to understand that Social Security in its entirety, not just the retirement program, but the disability program and the survivor program, cover people at a range of, at every stage of the life cycle. So you have kids, you got teenagers, you got young adults, you got mid-career folks, you got older adults, all of them at once receiving Social Security benefits. So first of all, the first part of that is that it's already a fallacy. The second part of it is that our kids are going to need Social Security as much, if not more so, than their parents. And we know this because we are already seeing the effects of the Great Recession on younger populations. We know that younger people have experienced, because of displacement and structural inefficiencies in our macroeconomics, we know that we've had higher unemployment rates among young adults and teens, and that this is going to continue to follow them in terms of their ability to accumulate wealth over their careers. And this is going to make them more dependent and heavily dependent upon Social Security. That means that we're obligated not to cut the rug out from under our children, but to make sure that they have a strong and secure retirement. And that means strengthening the pillars of progress that are Social Security and Medicare.
It's ironic, Maya Rockeymoore, when I think about it, because we have all these politicians out there talking about greedy geezers and how we need to do this for the sake of the millennials. Well, but none of their proposals would affect baby boomers like me. They would always be benefit cuts. You always hear about benefit cuts to people a little further down the line, so they would really hit younger people. And I guess what I'm getting out of your report, what your report is kind of reminding me of, is two things. One is the kind of universal popularity of this program and the desire to see it expanded. But the second is that, people say, well, Social Security, it's an old people's issue. But really what I get out of this, and I want your thoughts about it, is, yeah, but it's also a millennial issue. It's also a racial issue. It's also a poverty issue. Isn't it really, people talk about intersectionality. Isn't there a lot of intersectionality around the Social Security issue?
Social Security is the ultimate intersectional program. I mean, because it touches everybody at all stages of life,
including gender. Yeah,
including gender. And so, in fact, women and their children are the majority on the program. And so we have to realize that, this is a program that's important to all Americans. It's one of our great pillars of progress that came out of the New Deal, and we strengthened it with, certainly by expanding it over time. But we need to continue that drive to strengthen it and expand it over time. And we know how to, not only do we know how to do it, but we know how to fund it too. And so you have a lot of people saying, well, how would you pay for it? Well, you know what? Scrap the cap, because it simply makes no sense. That we've got billionaires who have been skirting their obligations, by the way, to their contributions to Social Security because of unearned income, which is not actually realized. That's income that's not realized by the Social Security trust funds. Yet at the same time, they're only capped. They're only paying Social Security tax like literally within the first minute of every year. They pay off their Social Security taxes because we have it capped at a number that's in the low 100s now. What is it? 117,000.
It's 118.5.
Okay, 118.5.
And so, go ahead.
So I mean, literally, we know how to pay for it too. And so anybody who says, well, we can't afford it is absolutely actually lying.
Right. Or to be generous, maybe just woefully ignorant of the facts. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but I encourage people to read your report at globalpolicysolutions.org, Dr. Rockeymoore. Maya Rockeymoore. I was just reading while I was speaking, which is a really bad idea, but because you guys have some creative ideas in there that I think people should see, the idea of a structural unemployment credit, which would help people affected by stagnating wages, structural unemployment and underemployment, really interesting idea, reinstating the student benefit, as well as, increasing benefits by a uniform amount. These are all great ideas. It's a very interesting report. Thanks for producing it, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me on, Richard. Take care.